Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're just going to give it a minute just for a few other people to join us. We had quite a lot of interest in today's Q&A, which is not surprising given the changes in the rules, and we really hope that we're going to be able to answer as many of those as possible. We'll get introductions and things away shortly, so bear with me. Great. I think we're all in which case we will begin. So a very good afternoon to you. Welcome along to this Trading Standards Q&A with partners. My name is Tudor Price. I look after the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, which for many of you will know is a business support service provided by Kent County Council and the government and we've been running a helpline for businesses across the county, taken over 14,000 calls since March, and our role really is to try and help you navigate your way through the government's business support measures, as well as obviously signpost you to the experts that you need. So we're delighted to be involved here with trading standards, environmental health, and the enforcement team to, again, try and help you navigate your way through what is obviously a very difficult, confusing time for all of us. This webinar is being recorded, and for those of you that registered through the website will receive a link to that recording once we've done the editing and polishing on all of that. You will see in the live chat box there are a number of contact details that have already been posted. There's a phone number for the helpline, the environmental health team, and so forth, and we'll continue to post links in there which are relevant to some of the questions which you raise. The questions that we have received already exceed 90, so there's a lot of questions that have come in, and understandably they are on a whole range of different topics, from grants all the way through to whether or not you're allowed to sort of step outside your front door, and if you do, what you have to be wearing. Needless to say, in an hour, we are not going to get through all of those, but we will do our best to try and make sure that we cover groups, if you like, and where there is an answer to one question, hopefully it will cover other aspects of similar type questions. But if you are stuck, obviously the Trading Standards team have a website where you can submit questions and ask for advice, or you can call us at the Growth Hub and we will arrange a call back for you from one of the Trading Standards or one of the advisors that are helping us today. Okay, so I'm going to ask your questions, those that have been submitted already and those that appear in the chat. Again, apologies if I don't get round to everybody's questions, but we will try and make sure we cover as much as we can as possible. The first thing to say is all of us, I think, are having a tough time of this, some more so than others. The challenge that we all face, certainly in terms of the experts on the panel here this afternoon, is that information is sparse, and it takes a while for politicians obviously to make their statement, to implement the change, and then to cascade to us the detail. So detail is always slow to come through because there's always a multitude of variances and nuances which take time to be decided upon. And therefore, you may have a few frustrations from us today, unintentionally, where we are unable to give you a definitive answer. What I have asked the panelists to do is to try and give you at least some guiding principles to work to, so that you can move forward with some good conscience and in good faith that you are trying to adhere to the general principles of the rules, even if we can't give you definitive clarification at this point. So we are doing our best, and we know that you too are also trying your best, otherwise you wouldn't be here trying to find out the answers. So thank you very much indeed. That's enough chat from me. I'm now going to invite the panelists just to introduce themselves, who they are, who they work for, and their area of expertise, and then we'll crack on with questions. So I'm going to come to you first, Nathan, then to Jim, then to Trevor, and then to Paul. So Nathan, over to you.
Thank you, Tudor. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today. My name is Nathan Martin. I'm the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Commercial and Food Services at Kent County Council. My role is slightly different to other trading standards officers because I work in a team called the Business Advice Services team, which is stepped away from enforcement. So our main purpose is to advise businesses work with you, try and help you get things right before any sort of enforcement has to be done. I'll be mainly answering questions on business closures and such today.
Thank you very much indeed, Nathan. Jim.
Thank you, Tudor, and yes, hello and welcome to everybody. My name's Jim Whiddett. Normally I'm a trading standards manager, but today I'm here representing the KRF enforcement cell. So basically the enforcement cell it groups together the local authority representatives who conduct enforcement on COVID legislation, and we try and provide a consistent approach across enforcement authorities and across Kent and Medway. And I'll be hopefully answering your questions in relation to enforcement activity. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Trevor.
Thank you. My name is Trevor Ford. I'm normally the Environmental Protection and Licensing Team Leader within the Environmental Health Department at Ashford Borough Council. Similar to Jim, I'm here to assist with answering questions surrounding enforcement. And since kind of beginning of last year, obviously I've been picking up a lot around the COVID enforcement in Ashford and compliance work. Thank you.
Trevor, thank you. And finally, Paul.
So Paul Hayes, I'm one of the business advisors in the Kent and Medway Growth Hub helpline team, supporting sole traders, SMEs, partnerships, limited companies all throughout Kent with a range of services. We've got the business support networks where we have groups of businesses getting together every couple of weeks just to talk through challenges, share resources, contacts, and support each other overcoming business challenges. I think Tudor mentioned about the well-being side of things, which is taking a bit of a hit at the moment. So these business support network sessions are proving particularly popular and very helpful to all of those businesses impacted by what's going on. And also we provide guidance around the various schemes that are being put out there by the government and also non-government organisations, which is always an interesting challenge navigating those. So that's where we're able to help.
Brilliant, Paul. You've got a job ahead of you this afternoon, but thank you very much indeed, all of you. Okay, so at the end of this session, we will invite you to pass comment as to whether or not you feel this session has been worthwhile, and also whether or not it's answered your questions, and that will be a poll that will run at the end. So do keep sticking around for that. Okay, let's crack on with questions. So first on my list here, we're dealing with retail. And the first one at the top is, can click and collect and drive-through collect to continue, and can we continue to sell non-food items? Click and collect. Where are we with this one? So who wants to venture into that field first? Nathan, over to you, sir.
The short answer is click and collect and drive-through can continue. If you're a food retailer, you don't have to open just for click and collect. You can actually open and allow people in to browse in your shop. There has been a question on mixed retail, which this one seems to suggest, because some goods are being considered essential and others are not. What we would say in the situations of mixed retail, if you are predominantly a business that is allowed to be open, for example, a supermarket is predominantly a food business, so they can be open but continue to sell non-essential items, then you can be open. If you are what will be considered a non-essential retail business, but you happen to sell a small number of essential goods, then that is not enough for you to meet that exemption. But even if you can't open, you can still continue to work by click and collect with people placing an order over the phone or by the internet or whatever, and then clicking up without coming into the premises. Likewise with drive-through, as long as they don't come into the premises, that's perfectly fine.
That's interesting, because actually we've got one of the other questions in that category is around a sole proprietor who has had COVID-19 and therefore maybe sporting some immunity. Can I allow people in the shop? I guess the answer to that is no, unless it's click and collect. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Unfortunately, well, if he's a food retailer, then yes, he's allowed to be open regardless of whether or not he's had COVID. His COVID status, it's irrelevant. It's not in the legislation. If it's not an essential goods, then unfortunately, no, the fact that he's had COVID does not allow him to open.
Okay, that's interesting. Are we, as a bicycle shop, allowed, encouraged or discouraged to open during this lockdown period? I guess the argument being that fitness is good for the mental health and therefore, you know, could be seen as an essential service. What's the viewpoint on that?
Well, fortunately, this one's an easy one because bicycle shops are specifically listed in the legislation as a premise that is able to open. So as a bicycle shop, continue to open as normal.
Fantastic. That's good news. Now, business centres. Again, I guess loosely retail in the so much that they are sort of providing services to people that are coming in. Business service. Which businesses can and can't open within business centres? Is the venue and nature of the premises play a part in that? Is that?
Well, this would be the same sort of situation as malls and such, and it would again come down to, can the individual business, is it allowed to open? Unfortunately, the list that has been made available in the guidance is out of date. That's the Tier 4 guidance that's available at the moment. So those businesses have slightly changed, but they are mostly correct. Okay, so if you took a look at that piece of guidance, that would give you maybe 95% of the answers. If you want the full list of businesses that can and can't open, you unfortunately have to go to the legislation itself. That's in Schedule 3A of the new regulations. What I'm going to do, when you've moved on to somebody else, I'm going to drop links into the chat, both for the guidance and for the legislation. So the two of them together will give you a complete answer.
That's brilliant. And you said that within there's a list of those businesses that can and can't open. Is that right? There's a...
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, if you're not used to dealing with legislation, it is quite difficult. It is quite difficult to find it, but it's in the very last section of Schedule 3A. So it's, I believe it's section 16, paragraph 16. It lists the ones. It lists all the ones that have to close. Sorry, and then anything else not covered. No.
Yep.
Sorry, I've got myself all mixed around. It lists what is allowed to open.
While you dive into the chat with your links, I'm going to come across to Jim because Jim's going to help you out there a little bit with a bit of clarity. Jim, over to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So in the legislation, there's basically three types of businesses. So as Nathan has quite clearly stated, there's businesses that must close or are restricted, and they are within the schedule. You then have businesses that are permitted to be open. Sorry, I've got somebody calling in. And then if you don't appear on either of those two lists in the legislation, there is the third method, which, as Nathan has already alluded to, is the click and collect. So basically, you look through the two lists and you're looking at 15, 16 and 17. They're paragraphs 15, 16 and 17 within Schedule 3A. And one explains these are the people who are restricted, these are the ones who are allowed to be open, and if you don't appear in either of those lists, you do click and collect. Okay, so hopefully, and once Nathan drops that into the link, you can then go and have a look and you can see if your business is listed. If you're not listed, then you're a retailer or services, then it is the click and collect function. Okay.
That's great, Jim. While we're on that subject, there's a question here from a photography studio. And the reason why I think it might be appropriate is because it's that balance between obviously closed to the public, but what about business to business services? Is there a differentiation there, or what are some principles that people should be adhering to help them figure out whether they can or can't stay open?
Okay, so there isn't a distinction between services to a business from a business, but if you go back and actually look at the very beginning of Schedule 3A, it defines when you can actually legally leave your home. So that's kind of one of the overarching principles that people are going to have to hold on to here, and that is you have the ability to leave your home under certain specific situations, and that would be to go food shopping, for medical help, those sorts of things, but also if it is for work. But that work is only if it cannot be done at the home. So, like this, most of us are all probably sat in our own homes at the moment attending this meeting because that's the appropriate thing to do. So something like a photography studio could be a difficult one because you probably can't do it from home, but then is it necessary and does it fit within the reason to leave your place of residence? So that's the kind of issue that people are going to have to think about when they're venturing out.
That's good. While I've got you, Jim, I'm going to just press you on this other question just come in from Craig Borman because it's similarly related. So they're a health and safety consultancy and training provider. They've moved, obviously, all their consultancy to remote support and where possible have moved to remote learning for students. There are some courses, however, that are only face-to-face, and this is due to the accrediting body requirements. So in order for them to get the recognised qualification, the current accreditation guidance says it needs to be done face-to-face. Can that go ahead? Can they teach in that sort of environment, or are they going to fall foul here?
I'm just trying to think very quickly of the schedule. I believe that for certain training facilities, there is an option, but I think we'd probably be better dealing with that one offline just to double check and make sure exactly. But I think it would fall to that whole point that if you can't do it remotely, it might be possible. But I think if the question can come through to us on email, and then maybe Nathan or one of the team can actually pick that up and go through it specifically, because I would hate to say, yes, go ahead, they book loads of clients, and then all of a sudden that'd be a big problem. That's one that we need to look at the exact details on, I think.
That's great, Jim. Thank you very much, Craig. So obviously, if you're listening, please do submit this question through the business advice pages on trading standards, and they will look into it in detail. I would wonder whether or not the accrediting body will give you some flexibility on the basis that all the GCSE exams are currently obviously having to sort of rethink how they do things, and I'm wondering whether they will give you a bit of flexibility in being able to allow them to deliver that remotely as well. But we'll wait and see. Okay. Nathan's been very busy posting links into the chat area there, so please do copy and paste them into your own browsers. Okay, I think we've got here. So just on the retail side, there's a question about food retail. We are a community interest company providing healthier, more affordable food to 600 families signed up as members of our food club. Can we stay open? So I suppose they're not, strictly speaking, a business, not a retail business. They are a community interest company. So Nathan, what do you think?
This was one of the pre-submitteds, and I did have a look at their business online. It seems to fit fairly well into a food retailer for me. I think you could definitely argue they're a food retailer and able to stay open.
There's a question here which I think I know the answer, and this is one of those opportunities maybe just to highlight the principles behind this. Can customers collect from our brewery shop? So obviously a manufacturer or producer of beer, of which Kent is a magnificent advocate. But I guess this is something to do with around whether or not they loiter outside and consume the products they've just purchased. Is that the thing?
Yeah. The whole idea of somebody being able to go into a pub and order a takeaway beer, that has gone with this one. But there is a specific difference between a brewery shop and a takeaway beer from a pub. So they can't sell it from the pub, but if they actually have a shop, then they can sell their stuff for consumption off the premises, provided they have an off sales license. So that they would need to have that one. The legislation also says that where you've got a restricted business like a pub and a non-restricted business like a food retailer, which is what this is, because food includes drink, then they can open the part of the business that isn't restricted, providing people are able to access that business without going through the restricted premise. So if their brewery shop is in a little corner of the pub, then you're looking at having to do sort of click and collect, okay, because it's not separate from the pub and the pub has to be closed. But if they've got a specific separate site for it, so alongside the business, whatever, then people can just go in there and browse as normal. If it is part of the bar, it's going to have to be click and collect, delivery, etc.
Which probably actually helps me sort of just ask the next question, which is in relation to sort of food and drink. So obviously you were talking about click and collect, and they're a cafe. So can a takeaway coffee shop that has retail stock visible sell those with the coffee at the door? So is there any, I guess it's a click and collect by any other means, isn't it, to some extent?
Again, it sort of depends exactly how they're doing it. If they're a coffee shop set up in a non-food shop, okay, and you do get something like that, so you might have, a different type, like Hobbycraft or something with a cafe inside it, something like that. Because people can come in to order a takeaway coffee, doesn't then give them free rein to browse what is going on in the shop. But if they've got items that are being sold from the queue, so they're there anyway, there's nothing wrong with them purchasing them, and we see that from Costa and other coffee shops. If it is a separate retail part, okay, so selling non-essential items like art and craft supplies or whatever, then you're going to have to do the sort of click and collect. People order in advance, so they're not on the premises browsing, and they collect that either at the door And you could argue if they've got justification to go in to get a takeaway coffee, they can pick up stuff they have already purchased.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thank you very much. Trevor, I'm just going to bring you in here because there's a question which may or may not. It's to do with how can I help? No, well, I've lost it now. It was there a second ago. There it was. Oh yeah, visiting client premises. Am I able to visit clients at their premises for meetings, and how far am I able to travel? So assuming that they've got a reason to be out, just in terms of them safeguarding and sort of the environmental health aspect of things, what's the answer from your end?
Yeah, well, obviously the first question is it reasonably necessary for them to visit in the first place? Obviously there's a whole host of different ways to carry on meetings, assuming that there is no alternative option and it's reasonable for them to be out. Then of course, like a lot of businesses which are still able to go into people's home, obviously there's some sensible precautions in terms of PPE and steps such as obviously speaking with the householders, making sure that they're free of COVID symptoms, no one in the house is self-isolating, etc. And then making sure that the minimum number of people who are there need to be there are there. Basically, once you've gone through those steps and kind of eliminated as many risks as possible, then you're left ultimately down at the stage of PPE, which obviously should be a relative last resort. Face masks, obviously sensible, hand gel, gloves, avoiding touching surfaces, etc. But it very much depends on the nature of the business and what sort of services are being offered. But where possible, avoid going into people's homes if it's reasonable to do so.
What about letting agents? Because we've heard about estate agents and the house prices and bits and pieces. Letting agents, obviously, can they work safely during the pandemic? I mean, are they, again, I guess it goes back to is it a legitimate reason to be out and about? But if they do, what sort of measures do they need to be taking?
Yeah, so the government guidance is really clear. House moves can still take place. Basically, people outside those kind of household bubbles shouldn't help with moving. Estate agents and removal firms can continue to work. You can go to property viewings. There is some moving safely guidance on the .gov.uk website, which is particularly relevant in this case. A lot of estate agencies are limiting viewings to people who are in a position to move at the moment. So they've got an offer on their property, and they're also offering online viewings to basically whittle down the people who actually want a physical viewing. So there's certainly a lot of different options that people seem to be pursuing. But yeah, again, it comes down to those. Do you need to do it? Is there an alternative way? And obviously, if you do so, how can you reduce those risks through face masks, gloves, reducing the people exposed, making sure everyone's symptom free and okay to attend?
And just, I mean, it's something that's probably cropped up many times before, but I mean, what are the obligations or requirements, or none, if you are providing a click and collect service, or people do need to come to your premises for whatever reason? What are the obligations on you in terms of providing a COVID safe environment? Is it down to you? Do you have to do that?
Yeah, so obviously if you're providing a click and collect service, obviously what you should be providing as a business needs to be risk assessed. You obviously need to avoid those risks where possible. So ideally, the people come click and collect, and they click and collect at the door would be more than ideal. Avoid people coming indoors. Obviously, if you're able to do so, maintain the 2 meter distance and take sensible precautions around avoiding those risks in the first place. A lot of the shops who are operating click and collect that I've seen have operated with a table or a desk across the doorway and a bell or similar, so that customers can come to the door, provide their details, pass over the package onto the desk, and the other person collects it and walks off without much in the way of interaction. So there's certainly a lot of easy ways to avoid that close contact.
Interesting. Lottie, Charlie has just posted a question in the chat here. So I'm a florist. I know I have to be closed, but people have asked to pay cash at the door. I have said no. Am I correct, or could they put the cash in an envelope and post through the letterbox? This is a transmission question. I know a lot of people now looking to use contactless cards and stuff like that, and I guess it's that confusion around whether that's a requirement or whether that's just voluntary or good practice. What's your take on that?
That doesn't really seem to fit one of the click and collect options by delivery, by post, by telephone or by web. So orders need to be placed by one of the accepted methods, which, if I remember correctly, are limited to those three. People posting money through the door, yes, you can accept postal orders, but it's not within the spirit of the legislation to, if someone posts it there and then.
So cash on collection is a no-no, is that right? Is that what we're saying?
I would have to double check that particular bit. It's got to be a pre-order.
Got to be a pre-order, yeah. And I think I'm just wondering if. Okay, Nathan, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll chime in because there hasn't been guidance on payment methods. I think the purpose of it is to eliminate the customers entering the premises, so there's none of that browsing, there's none of that lingering and touching things and all sorts.
Yeah.
So my opinion, I'll invite Jim's on this as well, is that if they could achieve a click and collect order, the delivery is placed in advance, they know they've already purchased it, it's there waiting for them, and they just have to complete the sale, for example, by using a contactless terminal or handing over payment. I think if that can be managed based on your risk assessment in a risk-free way, the consumer doesn't come onto the premises, I would think that was probably okay. Jim, do you have a position on that?
I mean, just looking back at the legislation, it's quite clear that people are not permitted into the premises if you're doing click and collect. So then you do have, and it doesn't say anything about payments. I understand exactly where Trevor's coming from, because if it's open to interpretation. I know there has been public health guidance on reducing the amount of cash transactions, and in risk assessments for certain activities, there has been a push for contactless. So through the card terminals and things like that, and moving away from cash just because of the transmission. I think it's something that we could probably take away and maybe get some further guidance from colleagues at public health. It may be a point on best practice, but I think it is tied up in that whole point of, have you actually gone through the process that's permitted of web, telephone or post, and are you collecting? I think that's got to be the whole point. It's collecting rather than purchasing at that point. But we're going to have to seek further clarification, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on what you're all saying there, that sort of in the spirit of the law and spirit of the guidance really is that that there isn't, if it's trying to avoid the transmission and the sort of contact side of things of, and I guess Charlie, from your side, yeah, if you had a box where they're putting the cash in and you're not making any contact with it, I guess in principle that's, leave the box to one side for 72 hours, make sure it sort of passes away, then you should probably be okay. But again, more than welcome to submit a direct question through, and just below your message is a link to the trading standards advice pages, so you can submit something through there and they will try and give you a definitive answer. Interestingly, there was a similar question from Bob, who's a used car dealer offering click and collect. Is a customer able to reserve a vehicle with a deposit and then pay their balance on collection? So again, I suppose this is a payment on collection. The principles, what we're saying here is about contact and about sort of, so if it's handing over wads, which I guess may possibly lead to transmission, or if it's paying by card, that's going to be the differentiator there. Is that probably a fair assessment, Nathan?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to be careful as well, because it is for click and collect. So if that particular arrangement is they're going to turn up, they haven't purchased it, they've just basically saved it, put a deposit down so nobody else buys it. If they're then going to get in, drive around, open up the bonnet, blah, 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 that is not permitted by the legislation. It is purely if you have made a purchase, then you can collect it at the premises. So as I say, there's differing ideas here about the completion of the contract. I believe that if you have paid money for that good, you have purchased that good. And if you're just collecting it, I think it is okay. However, you have to be very, very careful that you're not allowing people to do all sorts of extra bits and pieces. It's for when a contract has been concluded and it's just the handover of the goods. Yeah.
Okay, so that's quite useful. Jim, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at paragraph 16 within the legislation, and it says to collect goods that have been pre-ordered by a means mentioned, and that's through the website, telephone or post. So it's not quite as clear as we would like it to be to say pre-purchased.
Yeah.
It says pre-ordered.
pre-ordered, and leaves me scope for the method of payment is up for discussion.
Method of payment, oh, and I am looking at it right now, and I can't see anything that says payment must be made in advance. Because I've just seen somebody put in the chat about a coffee at a takeaway point, and I
Yes,
understand
that's
that
been my next one.
Yeah, so I can see why that could be worded that way, but I think everybody should be looking to limit that kind of that physical money transaction as much as possible. But we will clarify that and see if we can come back to people on it.
Yeah, I think in as is often the way, really, all of us that are trying to trade and trying to keep our businesses alive, I think being flexible on the method of payment, but again, being mindful that we're trying to avoid contact and transmission of the virus. So I guess if it's by electronic means, great. But then I guess you could argue pin pads maybe are the same thing. So yeah, I think we're getting clarity on that particular point. Okay, I'm just going to ask a couple more sort of compliance questions, then we're going to move across to grant side of things. So Paul, you might want to get yourself ready when we come across to you shortly. So fitness, can I arrange outdoor exercise training? And if so, how many can attend? Found the guidance confusing. Is it one person up to 15 or up to 30? And I know this has changed over a period of time. So who wants to take that one? Nathan, first in there again. Thank you.
It is, yeah, you're right. It's changed in every single lockdown we've had. But at the moment, the rules are very clear. You can only leave your home to do exercise with one other person that isn't in your family or support bubble. So therefore, you can only arrange sort of joint exercise with one other person if you're a personal trainer. So all sorts of exercise classes for adults, unfortunately, you can't operate a class now.
Wow. Okay, that's a big change from last time, wasn't it? There was a bit of scope really. So and especially as we're all trying to take exercise, which in itself is, now let's talk about that, because that's one that's been in the news a lot around Borough cycling 7 miles. Did that constitute local, and should exercise start or finish from your place of residence? I'm going to ask probably Jim on that one. Jim, where are we? Smiling wryly at me. Where are we on this getting out and about for local exercise?
Thanks, Tudor.
You're welcome.
That would have to be something, I think, that it comes down to necessity.
Yeah.
So the whole point around travel is going to be necessity. Now, some people live very closely to those sort of green open spaces where they can get to, and other people don't. But I think as it's being played out in the media, the police are dealing with those sorts of necessary travel issues, and it would be on a case-by-case basis. And that whole point is, you know, I think it's very easy to turn around and say, if I drive from Kent to the Lake District, that is not necessary. If I drive 2 miles down the road to go to the beach to walk in the open space there, is that necessary and is that appropriate? If I drive 25 miles, probably not. So I really do think it's going to be on that case by case. I can link through to Kent Police and see if they've got any further guidance on this at the moment that they're issuing to their officers, because they would be the people who would be, you know, challenging people if it was an unnecessary journey. You can go local. The rules stroke guidance that the government are giving at the moment, it does say within your locality and local to you, but it doesn't give that, you know, within 2 miles, because the park might be 2.5 miles from me. So it says local, but we will see if we can get some further guidance, maybe from Kent Police or something, and then we can post that out later on.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I think I did see one comment which said you sort of exercise or your fitness should start and end at your place of residence, which is always a nice sort of helpful. I think that makes sense, you know. But that explains for some cyclists who do 50 miles in a go. You know, you think, well, actually, it's going to take them on a long journey, but if they're not getting in contact. Yes,
and I know from seeing things online and things, there are people who are doing a 1 kilometre loop 10 times to get a 10k run in. Other people are doing 3 and doing it, but is it as the crow flies? It's very difficult. So we'll see if we can get some further guidance on it. But in the legislation itself and also the rules the government have put out, it doesn't specify a distance at this point in time. That could change, and as soon as we get some clarity, I think that would help everybody.
That makes sense, Jim. Thank you very much indeed. A couple more questions. Nathan, I see you got your hand up, but we're going to ask you to put your question into the chat area, because we've got too many people to move across to verbal questions. But thank you. Just wanted to ask on behalf of key cutters, engravers, open or closed? Nathan, rather.
It's not something that I've specifically looked at, but they're not on the list of businesses that are permitted to be open. So they would fall into the category of you have to close your business premises, but you can operate by delivery, click and collect, etc. In this case, I'm not sure, how feasible that would be. You'd have to look at ways that you could manage that, maybe a contact-free handover of keys, all that sort of thing. It will be a difficult one to operate on that basis, but unfortunately it doesn't fit into one of the businesses that can be open. So it might be that certain things that you offer, you just can't offer at this moment unless you can find a way to manage it in a safe way. So for example, we look at tech repair shops, that sort of thing, like a mobile phone repair shop. They are allowed to be open with, you can't allow people into your shop, but you can do contact-free handovers and then operate it that way. So I guess you could argue it's that sort of thing. The retail business has to be closed, but you make the arrangements online, then do a contact-free handover and do the service, and then arrange to hand it back contact-free as well.
So broken keys or things like that, you've got to come in and get them done. Yep,
If you're talking about a locksmith, so the other side of it, if somebody has an issue with a lock that you need to repair, if you're offering services in people's home and you can't reasonably do that from elsewhere, then you can go into people's homes to do that. So the locksmithing side of things absolutely can operate.
That's great. Okay, we're going to come back to some more questions around sort of entering people's homes, and so those of you that are asking questions or have pre-submitted questions, don't worry, we'll get round to these shortly. I'm just watching the clock. A lot of questions, of course, around grants and the government support measures. Now, this is something that we specialise in on the Business Support Helpline at the Growth Hub. We live and breathe the guidance documents that come out from local authorities. And we've secured sort of several £1 million worth of grant awards on behalf of the government and local authorities. It's not easy, and I'll be honest, we as experts sometimes get really confused, and we have a meeting twice a week, every other morning, to really work through the detail and try and understand it. So believe you me, if you're confused, you are not alone. Equally, though, I make light of that because I do know it is actually quite a serious matter for many of you. So I'm going to invite Paul to just, as a starting point, try and give a sort of overview of the funding landscape as it has been specifically around the sort of retail and the premises side of things. So, Paul, I'd like to step into the lion's den on this one.
Thank you. And yeah, Tudor's absolutely right. We are all in a situation where we are navigating the intricacies of all of these schemes. And I guess the one word of assurance we can give you is that if it isn't clear, we will take it away and we'll go and find out. So I've been involved in lots of dialogues, correspondence, phone calls, emails with various local authorities to help get clarity where appropriate or support people with applications. Lots of people out there also of an age where technology isn't necessarily easy. So we've been supporting where we can with people, guiding them through online applications for grants, etc. I guess in summary, what I would say is that if your business has been forced to close, and I would refer you to the link that Nathan was putting into the chat, then effectively you are entitled to, in the new world, the closed business lockdown payment, which is a one-off payment, and it is determined by your business rateable value. So if your business rateable value is less than or equal to £15,000, there is a £4,000 one-off payment. Anything above 15,000 but under 51,000, it's a 6,000 one-off payment, and anything business rateable value over 51,000 is a 9,000 one-off payment. Excuse me. What was interesting was reading through all the support guides around this. That's a one-off, but of course, if you have been forced to close, you are equally eligible for the local restriction support grant brackets close brackets addendum 5, 5th of January. So with that one, we were all aware of that when the first lockdown started, when the sort of the November lockdown kicked in through to December. And this is also driven by rateable value. So at the moment, the rateable value, again, those going through those tiers, so 50,000 under, it's £2,001. 15,000 to under 51,000, it's £3,000, and over 51,000, it's £4,500. So there are some reasonably substantial figures here that are available if you have been forced to close. Forced to close also, Nathan will correct me if I'm wrong, but allows for people, businesses who are operating click and collect. Okay, so it is if your substantive business has been affected. So there are scenarios where people can actually be qualified for both of those payments. Unfortunately, as we know, there is a population that don't pay business rates. A lot of small businesses don't pay business rates, don't have a rateable value. And that's where, to a great extent, you are at the mercy of the additional restriction grant discretionary, which is the local authority discretionary grants, which are smaller chunks of money. And each of the local authorities has their own particular criteria around this. Also, there have been windows of application that have opened and closed because it wasn't a large amount of money, but I would encourage you to keep an eye on your specific local authority's website for details of any new discretionary payments that are going to be made available.
That's a pretty good summary, Paul. Well done. It is awkward. We are in the process at the Growth Hub. We are in the process of just developing a sort of web page visual, which will allow you to select the local authority, and then it will sort of show you a timeline of what schemes were available when, and then a link to the respective local authority website. I guess the thing to point out here, which again, unfortunately, doesn't make it any easier for you, but at least you will understand the context. Each local authority is handed the money from the government, and then they are responsible for the distribution, the application, the payment, and all the rest of it. So it's being operated at the local authority level, of which we have 13 here in Kent, including Medway. So there is a delay in the sort of capacity of different local authorities. So you'll go onto a Maidstone website, and they'll have everything up and ready, and they'll have all the forms there, and you can click and fill and process it. You might go to Thanet, unfortunately, who are behind the curve and struggling to keep up, and they may still be working on the grant schemes that were available back in November. So it is a mixed picture. If you have any questions or you are looking for clarity or peace of mind, again, you can give us a call at the Growth Hub, which is 03333 602 300. And any one of these advisors will do their best to try and answer your questions. Now, let's have a look at some specific grant questions. So question here from a consultancy: if you've applied and received an additional restrictions grant in December 2020, are you able to claim again for January 21? Paul, I think you answered that question, but do you want to just cover that again? Gotcha.
Yeah, apologies, Tudor. I was just trying to drop a link into the Government UK site that allows people to check whether or not they're eligible. So it depends on the particular local authority, Tudor, I think, doesn't it? Because some have closed ARGDs and haven't reopened, some have reopened, depending on the availability of the funds. So just check your local authority website for details of what funds may or may not still be available for an ARGD.
Okay, there's a question here. Retail face masks and bag online, please. Where can one access a grant to support business? So, well, I think this is us is a short answer to that one, isn't it? I think. Okay, excellent. So the question here: manufacturing drinks. So why have businesses that have been unable to trade but not forced to close since the first lockdown been classed as ineligible for any further support grants such as LRSG and ARG? I've been told by, I think it's Thanet District Council, TDC, that because my income in the month prior to lockdown, and then it runs out the rest of the question. Yeah, I think this is a probably thorny issue, but this is to do with those that are forced to close and those that have had severe impact. Do you want to try and elaborate on where the different grants, because I know there were those that are forced to close, and then there are those that were impacted severely. Is that the LRSG Open?
It was, and I think because there's lots of local authority variations here, Tudor, probably the best thing to do is I'm happy to pick that up specifically with the person. So I'll drop my email address into the chat now, and if they want to come to me, I'll follow that up.
That's brilliant, thank you. Question here from Hospitality Models. I would like to know how the ARG amounts for each business are decided and the criteria. A colleague who is based in Camden, so outside of Kent, runs a similar business to mine and was awarded a £10,000, yet I was only awarded 750. Now this is ARG, which I think you mentioned about the discretionary element. Do you want to just sort of elaborate and sort of try and make some sense of that?
Apologies, Tudor. I was just dropping my email into the chat. Can you just repeat that question?
Yes, certainly. So I would like to know how ARG amounts for each business are decided and the criteria. So they're making reference to a colleague of theirs in Camden who got 10,000 and yet they only got 750. It's an ARG.
Again, yeah, this is this is a really interesting one. So each local authority has determined its own criteria, and discretionary is the key issue here. So there are some local authorities that have been more generous, some less generous. Initially, some have been quite careful so that they don't dish out all the money straight away. It's simply a consequence of local variations, I'm afraid.
Yep, thank you very much. So yeah, discretionary is the key there. And one thing we do know is that local authorities were given a chunk of money for the ARG. They were allowed to spend that as they saw fit, and they had a period within which they needed to spend it, which actually is about a year and a half. What the reasoning was initially was the recognizing there's going to be some requirement for finance and support for businesses as we come out of the pandemic. They held some funds back with a view to being able to provide that support when it's needed most, and therefore it should reduce the available pot, if you like, that was being provided at a local authority level. Now, that has been applied differently across the UK, so it's something that you will see a lot of variations on. There's an interesting one here, obviously bounce back loans. Paul, this one's coming to you as well. Are the directors of a limited company personally responsible for the repayment of a bounce back loan if the business should fail?
Well, my interpretation of that, we have the bounce back loans have they were very popular right at the beginning, and it's all gone a bit quiet because everybody got in there when they could. But ultimately, the bounce back loans were, unlike the CBILS, they were 100% underwritten by the government, so you didn't have to provide the security that you did under a CBIL. But you are still responsible for those payments. We don't get off the hook because there's no security required. It's a bit like having a personal loan that's unsecured. We're still liable for those payments.
So yeah, it's still liable, and I think yeah, it's going to be something that you need to be aware of. Like any debt that you take on, it's the same sort of principle. Okay, I'm just going to give you a quick guide, and then I'm going to come back to some sort of trading standards, environmental health questions as well. One of the things that has been missed out, and this is a question that's cropped up several times on the funding side here, is those individuals that were set up as service companies. So they were essentially a director of their own company. They were paying themselves a dividend, and in some cases paying themselves a national minimum wage or no wage at all, which was advised by many accountants as being a very tax efficient way to operate as a contractor or freelancer or whatever terminology you have. So yes, we have, Chambers of Commerce, the FSB, and the Institute of Directors have been collectively lobbying for that sort of forgotten element of the business community. The original answer back in September from Treasury was that they are unable to find a reliable way of differentiating between what is an investor's dividend, so stocks and shareholders, and a director's dividend. Now, we, along with many other accountants, pointed out there are probably several ways in which they could actually make the differentiation. However, they have sort of held firm in their position at the moment, and yet we know, certainly in this part of the world, where we have lots of creative organisations, lots of supply into the events and entertainment industry, many of whom are also contractors, plus IT and numerous other sectors, which I couldn't go into now. They are all in need, and we are currently looking at it from two ways. We are working with the local authorities to see if we can try and get them to broaden their scope for the additional restrictions grant, the ARG, because that's discretionary. And so we're trying to work with local authorities to get them to include that. We're also lobbying the ministers as well, and the Treasury, of course, to try and make that change. And I think one of the questions in here relates specifically to the FSB campaign, but we know that it is being lobbied hard by all the sort of business support organisations and membership organisations. And I can't really give you any answers to whether or not that is likely to come to pass, but it is certainly a growing voice, and one that is getting hard to ignore at Treasury. So I guess if you're a glass half full person, watch this space and keep in touch with the Kent and Medway Growth Hub. You can sign up to the newsletters there or the email alerts, and we'll make sure that you're involved. Okay. So there's lots of questions. Pending grant applications. Paul, last one for you, and then we're going to go back to some premises questions. The delays and stuff. I mentioned the fact that different councils are working in different areas. What should people do at the moment if they do or don't know if they've been successful in their applications?
Oh, it's a tough one. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because all the local authority staff are doing their utmost to try and respond to the demand that's coming in with a moving platform of funding, of guidelines. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where we just say, be as patient as you can, but ultimately, if it's getting to a point where it's really quite difficult, if there's no route straight into the local authority, then come via the Kent and Medway Growth Hub if the situation is getting quite dire, and we will happily get on the phone, try our contacts, ask each other and pitch in. Effectively, you're not stuck alone with this. We're all struggling in the same way, but just come through to the helpline number, which is the 0333 602 300 number, and we'll try to help if we can.
That's great, Paul. Thank you. I may come back to you as some of the other questions coming in at the moment off the line. So it is a very confusing situation. You obviously have the self-employment income support scheme. We have obviously the bounce back loans are still there. We also have the coronavirus business interruption loan. These are the big tickets. We also have furlough, and that has questions around it as well. And then of course you have the local authority grant schemes, which we've already mentioned a few of them. The CVLP, the LRSG, the ARG. Don't worry, you haven't got to remember any of those. You can just ring us up and we will explain, tell us your situation. We'll see whether or not we can help you navigate your way through all of those and put you in touch with the right applications and contacts pages. Brilliant. Let's come back to trading standards to Jim, Trevor and Nathan and the team there. So let's start with, I know it's a hot topic because we were discussing this before, mobile car washing, valeting. It's quite broad. It's movement. Is it essential travel? Who wants to start with this one?
Did you want me to kick off with this, Jim?
Go on then, Nathan. You get in there.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, does it fit within what will be considered to be allowed to open? Okay. The big argument on mobile car washing and valeting is valeting the same as washing a car? Because at the moment, car wash is what is specified in the legislation as having to be closed. So just to clarify, car washing is what we call a restricted business. So even if you're going to someone's home or etc., you still can't operate a car washing business. Okay, so those types of businesses have to close. Valeting is slightly different. If you look at valeting and consider it just to be cleaning a car, I would argue that it is no different from washing and should be covered. The big caveat is that OPSS, who are the central government department that advise on these, are considering it and looking at whether valeting is washing. But if all you do, if your entire business model is simply cleaning the car on the inside rather than the outside, I would personally argue that it is washing. Now, businesses that service and repair vehicles are able to stay open. So I think you need to look at your specific business and see what you offer. So if a significant proportion of your business is actually what will be considered repair. So for example, during your service, you restore people's alloy wheels, for example, or if you repair scratches and all that sort of thing, then there's an argument to be made there that you are repairing, and so you should also be able to stay open. Now, Jim will give the enforcement perspective of this, but my particular perspective is it doesn't specifically say that you have to close, so I will not direct you to close at this point, okay? That's my opinion as somebody who's primarily about advice rather than enforcement. And we should know within a week, and if we get advice within a week to say that valeters have to be closed, then we will update people. But I would invite Jim at this point to give the enforcement perspective.
And Jim, while you're answering that question, I've got a question in the chat here about jewelers and repairs. It comes under the same loose sort of definition, so maybe you could cover that as well.
Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this reasonably short because it started raining here, and you might be able to hear that coming over my mic, so I apologise for that.
That's fine.
Okay, so I don't disagree with anything that Nathan has said. It's quite correct, we are waiting for further guidance on this, and the whole issue is that obviously car washes are not permitted to be open unless they're an automatic car wash. That is specified within the legislation. So if people are going, then they've got to consider if that trip by that consumer is necessary. There might be scope if the valet was going to somebody's home, but again, if it is just to wash the car as Nathan has outlined, then I would suggest that that is not permitted under the legislation. So it does come down to how do you deal with the initial point of, can I leave my home? Does the legislation allow me to do that? And the starting point is you can if it's work that is permitted that you cannot do from home. So washing a car is not a permitted activity at this point in time, so therefore that wouldn't be, and it's termed in the legislation as a lawful excuse, so that's not a lawful excuse for you to then go and do that work. And sorry, Tudor, the second point was on
about jewelers. Jewelers offering repair service. Is that still okay?
Okay, jewelers aren't in either of the lists in the schedule. Nathan's nodding, so I've got that bit right. So therefore, I would say it would be under the click and collect point, and the whole point that Nathan said earlier on about, you know, if you've got a broken key and you take it in, it would have to be exactly the same thing, because as jewelers aren't in, I think it's 15 and 17 as the two specific paragraphs in the schedule, they fall under 16, which is the bit that says it's click and collect and transaction type of method. So somewhere, oh, apologies, coming in. It would have to be the distance transaction point of view. How people are going to feel comfortable doing that with jewellery on the doorstep, I don't know. It depends on the value of the item. But at this point, they're not allowed people in the premises. That's the underlying point. And I think that's what all of the enforcement agencies will be looking at is, if you're a jeweller, what are you doing with people inside the premises? That is not permitted as the legislation is currently worded.
Can I also jump in and say on that same thing? The click and collect option that we talked about for mobile phones would apply here. However, I don't think anything like that, if the customer actually has to be there, if you have to measure up the customer, if you have to put it on them, you have to fiddle it while it's on them, I don't think you could do that, because then you are having prolonged contact with the customer. So if it is purely, for example, I've got a broken necklace, it needs a new link, I'm going to drop it off, we'll have a contact-free drop-off and redelivery, and I think that's okay. But if it actually involves effectively working with the consumer in the same way that a tailor might tailor clothes to a consumer, then I don't think it would be allowed.
No, that's fair enough. That's okay. So we've just lost Paul Hayes, because I knew that he was having trouble with his internet today, so he may yet bounce back to us, because I've got a question specifically around bounce backs. But in the meantime, Nathan has asked, this is the other Nathan, one of our attendees, we run a mobile coffee box in Ashford Park. I know it well. With COVID-safe queues, perspex screens, doing all the right COVID-safe things, which is excellent. Even with this, are we still allowed to trade even if we are creating queues? And I suppose that's always the worry about click and collect or takeaway service, the queuing side of things. Are they still okay to trade there? Who's going to take that one? So, yeah, Trevor.
I'll go for that one, soon as it's in our borough, and I know the park that it's in. Yes, you are allowed to trade. Obviously, you've highlighted some of the measures that you've taken, which are all sensible. Obviously, it's takeaway, so there shouldn't be any seating areas associated with it. But yes, you are allowed to trade in that circumstance.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Trevor. So let's just talk about dog grooming, because I remember there were some questions last time when we were in lockdown 3, I think it was, which was yes, you could carry on. Now we're not so sure. So we've been told we're allowed to open for welfare reasons only. However, welfare is a very odd term, as most people are saying every groom is a welfare groom, as otherwise a dog will become matted, etc. What does welfare mean? That's a leading question. Scabby dogs or not? How does this play out? Nathan's laughing, so I'm going to go to him first.
I think it's going to be a combination of me and Jim again on this one. The legislation purely says you're allowed to leave the home for certain exceptions. One of them is for the welfare of an animal. Okay, so that is all that is in the legislation. The guidance that we had last time was that all grooming would be considered welfare. However, that guidance has been updated now, and the canine and feline retail group who liaise directly with the government have been advised that welfare now would be more significant. So, for example, if a dog has excessively matted fur, or if you need to do a treatment to treat a skin condition, something like that. And what they've basically said is if the welfare of the animal would not be put at risk or not be affected by not doing that treatment, then you shouldn't do that treatment. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around us because different breeds are more likely to get matted and more likely to suffer from more welfare. So the unfortunate answer is that it's probably going to be decided on a case-by-case basis. That groomer will need to know, its customers will need to know, if not the animal, then the type of breed, and is that fur likely to get matted? Does it need regular, constant maintenance to prevent there being a welfare issue, that sort of thing. So what is considered welfare is now much, much tighter, and you can't just assume that all grooming is welfare anymore. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Does that animal need it? Can it be delayed without hurting it effectively? Jim, do you have any more to add to that?
No, Nathan, I think that summary is absolutely spot on. I've read the guidance, and that's exactly where I've come from it as well. And it is very specific. I know as a dog owner, my dog has 2 coats, it's a crossbreed, and I know other dogs of the same crossbreed, and they've all got different coats. They would all need different different grooming regimes, let's put it that way. So it is going to come down to that specific point. I did see in the guidance that was also talk if it was directed by a vet as well. So if the vet turned around and said this is a specific issue that needs to be dealt with by a groomer, then obviously that's a very clear-cut point. But then the bit where the owner thinks that their animal is suffering, I think they would have to discuss that with the groomer and see if the groomer is prepared to accept it or not, because they would then have that ability if the animal is suffering. And again, we might need advice and guidance from a vet, because I'm not a vet and I couldn't tell you when breeds are showing signs of distress. I only know my own dog.
That's
so sorry, it's not more clear cut, but that's, you know, I think that's the whole point.
Not at all. And as you're a dog owner, I should apologise for the scabby dog comment, really. Obviously, I look at the cats.
That's all right.
So I have a very different view on things there. Excellent. Okay. I'm just mindful of time, but there's a lot of very important information being passed on here. We've lost Paul Hayes, unfortunately. He's not going to get back to us. So what I would do is if you have any questions around funding and support, again, I'll reiterate that number, which is 03333 602 300, or you can visit the Kent and Medway Growth Hub.org.uk. The post and contact details have been put into the live chat already. There's a couple of questions around grant funding, and there's one for charities and social enterprises. If you haven't already been in touch with the Kent Community Foundation, KCF, you can Google them and they'll come up. Kent Community Foundation have managed to secure a number of different funding streams for grant support, and they're specifically aimed at social enterprises. So that's a really good resource to go and have a look at. My friend James Horn up there is really, really helpful. They have programs that come up all the time. So if you're not on their email alert, make sure you sign up for that sort of thing. Yeah, for other sort of grant related questions, please do contact the Growth Hub and we'll do what we can to try and support you. Okay, we're going to take a few more questions and then I think we need to bring things to a close because obviously our inboxes are filling up very quickly and we need to sort of get back to the hard work there. just going back to one question here, which we had pre-submitted and also has appeared on the chat, which is around panic buttons. So essentially, this is organisations that provide home care, either for the elderly or for those vulnerable individuals. They need to go into people's premises to sort of help guide and express. I'm assuming this is probably classified as essential travel, but can we just get some steer on that then, Nathan?
Yeah, if you're offering a service, okay, you can continue to offer that in people's homes if you are required to enter their home to do so. So in this particular example, where I imagine 90% or so of your business is going to be dealing directly with elderly people, and it is reasonable in that case to say, well, these people do not use the internet, they do not use videos. You can look at whether it's possible to do it over the telephone, but if they're hard of hearing, again, that might not be possible. So if you look at it, if you do your COVID risk assessment to see how I can operate my business, and it makes it clear that, yeah, it's reasonable for you to enter their home to do it, then yes, I think you can do it. And with regards to any sort of tradesman who has to work in someone's home, if you have to enter their home to do that work, then you can do it. Just do it in a COVID safe manner. And of course, do not enter if either you or anybody in the household has COVID, is showing COVID symptoms, or is particularly vulnerable.
That's great, Nathan. Jim?
Yeah, just quickly looking through businesses that are allowed to be open, and mobility and disability support shops are permitted to be open. So they are in the list, allowed to remain open in Tier 4.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. There's a question in the chat here. Yes, Trevor, so do you want to add on that point as well?
Yeah, one thing I should probably highlight from KCC public health perspective, the asymptomatic testing for people who are leaving home. So KCC website is currently advertising people, if you need to leave home for any reason, including work, that you should probably go and get an asymptomatic test once a week. If you're going into people's homes, that's even more important because you potentially could be spreading the virus without realizing. So if you have members of staff who need to go into people's property, or if you're coming into contact with members of the public, do carry out and sign up for the free symptomatic testing at one of the many sites across Kent. There's currently lots of availability as the testing's ramping up. So that is another important control measure. So do make sure your staff sign up.
Yeah, a good point, well made there, Trevor. That's really, yeah. If you are involved in, again, if you're not sure, if we've not been able to answer this specifically during the course of this afternoon's session, and you're following the sort of the principles, if you like, and acting in good faith, if you are required to visit customers' premises and you have gone to the trouble of having asymptomatic testing, then that will be sort of in your favor, because well, I've tried to do everything and mitigate the risks. I've done everything I think is possible. So it's highly unlikely. And I was saying earlier to the panel here that in our experiences in the last sort of 3 months, we've had situations where someone has contacted us. There hasn't been the definitive guidance they were looking for because it wasn't available. They've acted in good faith. They've opened, they've traded, and then they've been subsequently closed. And then there was a threat of a fine. We put in a conversation, and the business said, look, we've verified that they did everything they could do to try and get answers and to take the mitigating steps. And of course, that fine was waived because it was recognized it was all done in good faith and that the information was available at the time. So that's not carte blanche to go away and try and get away with stuff. Obviously, you will fall foul, and you will meet Jim and his team in due course if you do that sort of thing. But it's obviously incumbent upon you to sort of, if you do have to move forward and you're not sure for certain, then at least take some mitigating risks, because that will sort of help. There's a question here around Kickstart Scheme, which I know about specifically. So if you are if you have a business that can create less than 30 placements, then you need to go through what's called a gateway organisation, of which there are several. You can look them up on the government website. But because I'm here, I would say the Chamber of Commerce is a gateway organisation, as is the FSB, and there are other providers also in the county. So if you have less than 30 vacancies to create as an employer, then you can submit those individually through your gateway organisation, and they will handle that for you. Okay. Just a quick question on enforcement, and we've had a few questions around where, if you witness breaches or non-compliance, what should you do? Obviously, no one wants to see that sort of thing going on, and how should the authorities be alerted? What's the best way to go? Jim, I'm going to ask you that question.
Okay, I can mention on behalf of trading standards, we would ask you to report those through to the Citizens Advice Consumer Service, and then that comes through to the relevant trading standards authority. Each district would have its own reporting mechanisms for the local authority. In the background, we work together. So if you get it through to one of the local authorities, because we can all enforce under the COVID legislation. So if you think, you know, premises X shouldn't be open, who do I let know? If you let one of us know, then we will sort out who it is who should be taking that action moving forwards. So each local district will have their own reporting function for their environmental health teams or whichever of their enforcement teams that are dealing with it, and that's normally via their websites. And if you wanted to get that into trading standards, then like I say, if you could go via the Citizens Advice Consumer Service, that would be really good. And I know people also link in via the police, and as they are also an enforcer under the legislation as well, like I say, we work it out between us who is the relevant people to take the required action.
Absolutely. I think, you know, Trevor, sorry, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah, I'll just chip in with another comment. Obviously, Jim summed up the business restrictions nicely. If the issue is individual behaviours, so individuals going into shops not wearing face masks, individuals having gatherings, and that should be reported to Kent Police, who obviously have web forms as well. But obviously, as Jim's highlighted, between individual districts and Kent Trading Standards, we obviously liaise quite closely over who leads on what complaints. So we'll deal with the business.
That's brilliant. We're going to bring this to a close now. I'm going to invite Matt, who's our technical backup there, just to put a poll up, which I'd invite you all to fill. And I did warn you about this earlier. This is going to be on your screen shortly. If you could just put in, this is always a bit worrying because this is sort of a live response to whether you thought this was been any good at all. So it could be really painful or could be really really beneficial. But it looks like we've got all the blues in the right place. So that's a great start. Thank you very much for doing that. Yeah, we are all in this together. Obviously, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, there is a lot of support out there, but there isn't always the definitive answers because it's taking time for these things to be worked through. It doesn't help you. It doesn't lessen the frustration. I understand that, but we are sympathetic and empathetic in terms of the difficulties that you face, and we will certainly do everything in our power to try and support you if it's available and we know the answers. The recordings, of course, will be circulated, as will obviously you've got all the links here in the chat as well. But thank you all very much indeed to our panel here, who have very kindly. There we go. That's brilliant. The poll is in, and we're done. Thank you. Thank you very much to Jim, to Nathan, and to Trevor, and of course Paul Hayes, who I shall be in contact with in due course. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Please do stay safe. You have contact details. If you have questions, please ask them. But again, on behalf of Trading Standards and the rest of the team, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon.